I've lost count of how many times people have told me what I can't do. Teachers in school told me that I wasn't fit for college, and I couldn't start my own business without a business degree, and my family expected me to get a job, get a boss, get paid, shop at IKEA, get insured, play it safe, don't make noise, don't take risks, buy the latest things to impress the neighbors, and that is terrible advice. You can't make woodworking videos. Why would anyone watch you? They want professionals. You can't just build a cabin in your backyard. Reclaimed wood? What about bugs? Building codes? Insurance? And you can't restore public furniture. That's stealing. You can't make a designer lamp. You're not a designer. Just buy one. And you can't give your plans away for free. That's stupid. But here's the thing. I did it anyway. Because if there's one lesson I have learned in my life, it is... So, the first part of this do what you can't journey, that's me trying something that I haven't done before. Among building a cozy cabin and also building a YouTube channel, I have also been building my woodworking shop and trying to make a living from it. But it is not all happy vibes. I got this friend, let's call him Mark. Mark recently got himself a new laser cutter and was asking for project ideas to make it worth the investment. So, being the good friend that I am, I sent him some killer ideas for lamps that I found on Etsy.
Message from Jesper.
These lamps sell for a lot of money. One guy even sold over 150 of them. But Mark replied with a rolling on the floor laughing emoji. Rolling on the floor laughing. I really couldn't figure it out. Inside my head, this laughing emoji just got bigger and louder. So I figured I'd better do something about it. So here is the plan. I'm going to make that lamp myself and find out what is so laughable about it. And you better believe I'm going to have a chat with Mark about it. So I got myself a laser, and while I was setting it up with the help of my shop assistant, I kept thinking about lamps. There is a very popular lamp designed in Denmark, where I'm from, called the artichoke, or just the cone. It is quite expensive and still very, very popular. Maybe I can make my own version of that and become a millionaire. That would definitely shut up Mr. Rolling on the floor laughing emoji, and also help with the finances in my workshop. That could need some work. Keep on dreaming, dude. I started researching cones, like really. The rumor spread that I had a laser, so a friend in Scotland sent me a bunch of project files ready to cut. Weirdly enough, he's got laser files, but no laser. And I know he could use some cutting board templates, so I started practicing my laser skills by cutting out templates. If you're having any ideas on what to make on a laser, drop them in the comments. I might steal them, or at least send you an emoji. Rolling on the floor laughing emoji. No, not that one. Sorry. I would really like to be one of those designer YouTubers who just scratch up brilliant designs, and that might happen in an alternate reality. But in this real reality, I tried to buy the drawings from some sellers of different cone lamps on Etsy, and they all turned me down. They were kind enough not to send me a laughing emoji though. One of them suggested I could just buy his finished lamp and pretend I made it. Very kind of him. I really hope I won't need to do that. The lamp was like a challenge, daring me to step out of my comfort zone. So I picked up my pencil as a weapon against doubt and mockery. Or maybe just to calm myself down. I have bought all the tools I have in my shop with my own money. But you have probably guessed by now that I made a giant YouTuber mistake and said yes to receiving a laser for free. Receiving free tools is something most beginner woodworkers dream of. But it comes with a big catch. You need to make one or possibly more positive review videos about the tool instead of paying for it. So when X-Tool approached me with their new P2 laser, I said no to making 3 videos for a free laser. I said I would only do 1 video, and I would say whatever I wanted in the video, call it whatever I want, and also release it whenever I wanted to. I was pretty sure they wouldn't accept that, but they did. I personally hate those positive sponsored review types of videos, so you can be absolutely sure I'm going to say whatever I want in this video. And also about Mark. Rolling on the floor, laughing emoji. Mark, that guy. I don't know anything about making lamps with a laser cutter, so I made a few prototypes cut out in cardboard. That's actually a very good way to reuse cardboard boxes. I made these lamp prototypes very quickly and with zero material cost. And then my wife saw those prototypes, and while she really didn't like the lamp design, disappointing, she quickly got the idea of what was possible with the cutter. Halloween was around the corner, and she was in charge of Halloween activities at her job, so I helped her cut out Halloween cardboard stuff. Halloween turned into a Harry Potter themed week, you'll never guess the job, and I found some Harry Potter clip art online, traced it with the Xtool software, and cut out legendary signs and figures. The honest truth about Jesper Makes is that I imagined I would be this Viking woodworker, carving out my own canoe from one big log. So, my first tip for starting in woodworking is start with what you have. I had pallets, and luckily I didn't wait until some big log magically landed in my lap. I took those pallets apart with whatever tools I got, and then I put them back together with whatever tools I got at that point. So my point is, you can start under the worst possible circumstances and make something work. I promise you, every woodworker or woodworking YouTuber you watch or admire started in a completely different place than where you see them today. So maybe instead of complaining about all the awesome tools everybody has, pick up a pallet, a screwdriver, and get to work. This cone lamp design consists of almost 200 pieces, and I definitely begin to understand why they cost so much on Etsy. Cutting out all the pieces is easy enough. One of the things I really like about working with a laser is while it's doing the cutting for me, I can be productive and do more important stuff like catching up on my friends' YouTube channels. The laser is cutting the wood with a laser beam, and it is very precise. But for thicker wood, let's say from 6mm and up, the wood gets some charring on the edges. So I decided to run all the edges quickly over with some sandpaper to remove all loose particles. The pieces for my cone lamp looks like what it is, cheap plywood cut on a laser. The lamps that I saw on Etsy looked so cool, so I need to make this look like a million. I have some sample oils in different colors from Rubio Monocoat. I mixed the colors pine and chocolate. And it looks like, you tell me. Another tip for becoming a woodworker and YouTuber, besides from starting with what you got, and this is very cliche, but also very true. Be dumb. There will be a million reasons to stop creating or to stop posting videos. And more intelligent people might talk you into doing something else. But you need to be dumb and stubborn and just keep going, testing things out. Don't stop. So, what is your piece of wood? I have recently become a full-time creator. And instead of driving to an office to work for somebody else, I now wake up, hopefully, make coffee, make stuff, make videos, make more coffee and more stuff and more videos. And then I repeat it all. It means I'll need to make money every time I open the door to my shop. And I can definitely see how a laser will help me do that. It really helps using the most of scrap sheet goods, cardboard, acrylic and even thin metal. And as a YouTuber, I can edit videos while this is doing work for me. You might think that it is too easy for me to just say that. But let me tell you, you are not supposed to have it all figured out, so don't worry about it yet. Work with what you got and try to get some clarity on where you want to go. I chat with so many awesome people in the comments of my videos, and I hear about your dreams and challenges and struggles. I do plan to make a longer video based on the content of your comments. You'll notice that I've replied to almost every comment on my videos, and I'll keep doing that. You have probably figured out that this video is not about a laser or a lamp, but it is really about making stuff, making a living and also making a community and friends. The lamp made it into our living room, I snapped some pictures for Instagram, and I also made a reel about Millionaire Ambitions. God, I might just be the world's worst millionaire in training, still at 0.
Message from Jesper. Interesting. Should we give him a thumbs up? Oh, wrong emoji.
Oh, that explains it. Now I can go back to my normal life again.
Seriously, I was not laughing at your lamp. It was a thumbs up.
So my daughter noticed that I wasn't a millionaire and came up with an idea that she thought would fit my budget, and that was trying to build a cozy cabin for her with a budget as close to 0 as possible. Can we really build a cabin for $0 just using what we have laying around? We're talking about constructing a cozy, fully functional cabin in our backyard in the cold Danish winters without spending a dime, hopefully. We are not just putting up walls and a roof. This is Denmark. And we need to tackle insulation, heating, rain management, very crucial elements in our chilly climate. Neither of us have built anything like this before. So every step is a new catastrophe, of course, adventure. From dismantling old floorboards to using blown over trees for the frame, we are diving headfirst into a whirlwind of creativity and problem solving. Mostly problem solving. Can we turn scraps and logs into a warm, inviting cabin? And why exactly are we trying to build a zero-budget cabin together? If we are going to pull this off, we need to develop some serious hustling skills. So, who is the biggest hustler between the two of us? If you have watched my channel before, thank you, first and foremost. Then you also know that I started building my woodworking shop in a horse barn from literally nothing and hustling my way up to having, let's say, a decent amount of tools in my little shed now, including a sawmill that I hope we will get some use of. I would call myself a solid wood hustler. But you don't know my daughter Julia yet, so stick around. Because a year earlier, it was a beautiful morning, at least that's how I remember it. The birds were chipping away, and I may have gotten coffee served on my bed. The mood must have been really good because I allegedly said yes to building a cabin on zero budget. Julia had decided on a spot for the cabin and was out on the mover clearing the spot. And I was just thinking about how to source materials, naturally, but also about the adventure we were about to embark on. One of the reasons I said yes was that this could be the thing that we would do together as adults. Julia was the architect of the project and had made drawings of the cabin. I later made a model of the cabin from those drawings, and that helped us find some practical issues with the design. We also watched other people build cabins, people like Bo Miles, who built a $50 junk cabin for his wife, while also tending to their little baby and seemingly running a marathon too. He seemed to have a lot of building materials stacked around on his farm on a scale that we didn't. I'm not exactly running a marathon, but I had started to get into the hustling mode. And when driving around in our area, I spotted a really old building. The owners were literally throwing floorboards out from the windows and onto the street. I looked the place up, and it was originally the local dairy in this area, where raw milk was turned into butter, cheese, and dairy products. It was built in 1888 and was one of the older dairies in this area, so most likely the floorboards would be the original ones. We asked the owners about their plans with the boards, and they said it would help them if we could remove them. That was the first little victory towards a zero-budget cabin. We used the next few days sorting through the boards, removing the nails with this handy little reverse nail gun that actually shoots the nail out from the wood, and cutting off most of the damaged parts of the boards. Thank you for the boards, old dairy house owners. Thank you. But this was a small win in the big picture because we did not have anything to mount the flooring on. We watched Bo Miles just put some big rocks on the ground, and building your house on top of rocks has been common practice throughout history in many cultures and regions. I didn't have any big rocks laying around, and I think elevating the cabin from the ground level is pretty dang important in these rainy years we are probably looking into. So Julie's birthday was coming up, and I decided to give her a present for the cabin build, and I generously invited her to help pick it up. And it was not just because these concrete foundation blocks are heavy as I thought we could just have a little nice father and daughter. Okay, it is because they are heavy as I spent about 1,000 Danish crowns, yeah, that is what we call them, because it is the king's coins, so we call them crowns, on foundation blocks and some column cement. So technically the cabin is not free anymore. We also use tools, gas, electricity, time, etc, etc. So no matter what we do, it will never be free, and nothing is. But we try to spend as little of the king's taxed coins as possible, and that is the premise. If you already made an angry comment about the cost of tools and gas, please just leave it, don't delete it. I like to torture my brain trying to come up with a positive reply to comments from short-tempered, narrow-minded people, apparently. So the foundation blocks might be heavy because, you know, concrete is heavier than feathers. And I'm really looking forward to the much easier job of putting these into the ground because the soil here is really soft. Okay, the soil here on the slope down to the little lake is very, at least it should be. So it turns out that in the not so distant past, it was very normal to just bury demolished buildings on site as a quick and cost-effective way to clear the land. That probably explains why all these old bricks appear just 40 centimeters below the surface. There was another building on this property earlier, and I think we just found the remains of it. So we're building the foundation of the cabin with the feet into the remains of an old building on this place. I think that makes the foundation very solid, but it also adds an almost metaphorical aspect. We are not exactly standing on the shoulders of giants here, but we are literally building on a foundation of trash laid by our ancestors. Thank you, ancestors. I don't think it's necessary to put anything else than gravel down around these posts. But just to make it even sturdier, we are adding some quick setting cement. When you pour the dry mixture around the posts and add some water, it triggers a rapid hydration reaction. And if we were in an off-grid setting, like we are dreaming of, without any access to water, we could just put gravel over it and it would harden over time as the mixture would just absorb the moisture from the surroundings. Before all these engineered materials, our ancestors would have used a stone foundation with larger stones, small filler stones and clay and mortar. a bit like Bo Miles and his cabin, and certainly like the old barn here next to the cabin. It is built on big rocks. It is going to be quite the fun to build the maker barn on top of this foundation, or remove it, and getting a foundation made from big rocks approved by the city council. I can't wait to do that. With the foundation blocks in place, it is about time to figure out how to build the wooden base frame for the cabin. I think we're gonna need a lot of wood. So I remembered that my neighbor, who owned some of the forest around here, had given me a tree that had blown over in a storm a few years back. I started cutting some branches away from it over the winter, but I got away from it. So I told Julia about the tree that is literally lying just a 5-minute walk away from the cabin site, and we decided to go and take a look at it. So naturally, because it is just a 5-minute walk, I started up my old tractor to cover the distance, with the excuse that I needed to bring some equipment. Luckily, the tree was still there, now hidden by a lot of grass and bushes, so Julia got to work clearing up the entrance while I inspected the fallen tree. So I think this is actually where the birth of the cabin truly begins. This log, the black alder, will be the base of it, and I chunk it out into 3-meter sections with my chainsaw, because 3-meter-ish is the length that I can cut on my sawmill. It's funny I'm thinking of the capacity of my sawmill when my far back ancestors could easily process any length with just an axe and of course a lot of determination. But we are just two relatively inexperienced cabin builders here, so we'll need all the help that we can get. So with a chainsaw, I managed to get 3 pretty straight logs from this trunk, and all the offcut branches will probably also be building material or maybe firewood to hit the cabin. The next day, we are back in the forest preparing to drag the logs out from this slope. A few years back, I built a log arch with a friend who knows how to weld it, because I really don't know how to weld. A log arch is a very simple construction. By using the balance point of the log and the lever principle to lift it off the ground, I have been able to move pretty big logs all by myself. This is much better than just dragging the logs over the ground like a lot of people do, because it is getting a lot of soil and small rocks and dirt into the wood. And when we have lifted the log from the ground, I usually secure it with a strap around the front to prevent from shifting when we are driving over uneven terrain. Black alder is a really heavy kind of hardwood, and I'm really happy to have Julia around here to help me with the transportation. This was not only the birth of the cabin, but also the birth of something I didn't see coming. And that was Julia's interest in milling up wood, but we'll get back to that. So I started milling up the black alder logs. But this wood is very dense and I quickly ran into a problem with the sawmill. Take a look and see if you can spot the issue. As you can see, the blade began to dive into the wood, creating an unwanted curve in the middle of the log. It's basically unusable. This problem can arise from various factors, such as incorrect blade tension or dull blades. I spent hours trying to adjust the blade myself, but eventually I called my blade supplier for advice. He suggested trying out a blade made from bigger metal. I got it mounted and I was really excited to see if it could cut straight beams from this tough black alder. I was recently interviewed by a Finnish plywood company and they asked me what I found so interesting about wood. And my reply was, interestingly enough, also related to milling up wood. I really enjoyed the different scents of different kinds of wood. The sweet smell of a pine log, the tangy scent of an oak log, the flavor of a Cuban cigar factory when you run a walnut log through the mill. I think I can trace my love for wood all the way back to my childhood when my father asked me to help him chop firewood. Yeah, back in the 70s and 80s, it was perfectly fine to hand your 10-year-old an axe. I asked him later what kind of wood it was that we chopped, and he said it was mostly poplar. So poplar is definitely not my favorite kind of wood, but I do have a relationship with it. But I have never even worked with black alder before. The structure of this wood is very close to oak, but the scent is quite different. A distinct earthy and a little sweet aroma, a bit of damp forest floor with some spicy undertones. This could easily become my new favorite wood. Julia helped me mill up the black alder logs, and I showed her how to use the sawmill, how to put tension on the blade, and all the basics of cutting up a log. We even watched Matt Cremona mill up logs together, and this would become a pretty good investment later. We milled the black alder logs into the dimensions 15 x 7.5 cm timber. These dimensions provide a strong and stable structural timber, ideal for foundational elements of the cabin. So we dragged the logs out from the forest, put them on the sawmill and started milling up timber for the base frame. And almost immediately after milling the wood, we started building from it. Even my mother, who has absolutely no experience with or interest in woodworking, asked me if the wood didn't need to dry before I could use it. I think we need to take a little wood history lesson. This obsession with drying wood is a rather new thing. Furniture carpenters and timber framers have in most of woodworking history used wet wood to build from. And when I say wet wood, I mean green wood, fresh wood, wet wood. Let's call it wet wood. They were so skilled, they just accounted for the shrinking and the movement of the wood when constructing the furniture. So over time, the joints and fittings would just tighten up more. Timber framers, the guys building houses and structures from wood, still prefer wet wood. It's easier to shape wet wood, it is cheaper, and it is way more accessible. And when done right, having the wood drying in the position where it's supposed to be sitting can tighten the joints and make the construction stronger. Unfortunately, I'm not an experienced timber framer. I don't make the fancy joinery that I would like to make. The most fancy joints I'm currently making are half-lap joints, which is basically removing half of the materials on both pieces so they fit together. That's a pretty effective joint in many cases, and I'm using it a lot in this base construction. We slam the base together with big wood screws and wood glue, and we don't tighten it or screw it to the anchor posts in the ends yet, allowing it to move a little bit over time. It might be a simple start, but every sturdy cabin needs a strong foundation, and this is how ours begin, with a lot of these half-lap joints. One of the reasons is the length of the cabin is 5 meters, and our little sawmill can only cut up to 3.2 meters. I really should have bought that extension set. And another reason is that we don't have an unlimited supply of black alder, so I started to use the offcuts too, making the most of what we have. It is also a picture of the ingenuity that will carry us through the rest of this build. Julie had never really used a screwdriver before, but suddenly she found herself driving most of the 15 cm long wood screws into the base. We had some great days this summer building the base for the cabin. The weather was far from perfect, a lot of rain, but the work was filled with learning and laughter. Julia got used to a lot of different tools, like the screwdriver, the Makita circular saw, and she even tried her hand at the chainsaw a few times. There's nothing like the first time you see someone realize that they can handle a new tool with confidence. I guess like when I chopped firewood as a 10-year-old. Each cut and screw brought us closer together and also closer to our goal. And by the end of the summer, we had a fantastic, sturdy base for the cabin. In many ways, this end of our first major phase felt like a new beginning, setting the stage for the next step in our journey. This wasn't just a physical foundation, it was also a foundation of memories and skills inside both of us. Our common story. The next step is putting insulation in place between the wood posts before we start putting the flooring in place on top. I figured we could use some pallet wood to rest the insulation on, so Julia got to work mounting some thin rafters along the beams, and then she is putting some pallet wood boards on the top with a bit of spacing for ventilation. This prevents moisture buildup in the future. I hope so. A big part of this build is what I call top management, because of the frequent showers from above, and it will only get worse. So we sorted through the floorboards. These boards are really solid, with the tongue and groove intact on most of the boards. Who would throw these out? So after we had decided what boards to use, we gave them a quick cleanup using a small desktop thicknesser. This minor operation was challenging for this little machine. Still, we got the boards to a bit more uniform size, and at the same time leaving some of the use marks on the wood from its previous life. Some of the charm of building with historic materials such as these is that this little cabin is getting deep roots into history and stories to tell those who visit. I think I identified some of the boards as peach pine, and some were regular pine, which is way softer. We still needed to figure out where to get the wood for the cabin timber frame, but then I talked to one of my neighbors who had previously been in the Christmas tree business. He had a place with some old noble firs that had been used for producing greenery, and he was looking to get that area cleaned up. Still, it was only accessible briefly when the cornfield around it was harvested. And suddenly he called me and said that window was now, so I had a few days to harvest as much as possible before they would plow the field and make it inaccessible again. So I started up my old tractor, grabbed my chainsaw, and drove off. So, if you know me, and if you have watched this far in the video, I think you know me more than you would like, my sincere apologies, then you also know that getting logs is taking this guy some time. So, while we wait for that, let's get the platform ready for actually building the cabin on. So, for the next part, I only have footage from a GoPro camera, for reasons that will become obvious very shortly. I crashed my camera into the ground. We basically just reused some old insulation bats, put them on top of the pallet wooden slats, and then we topped it all off with a vapor barrier. Because of the cold climate here, it is a really good idea to insulate the cabin, starting with the part of the floor that is going to be inside the cabin. So the vapor barrier will prevent moisture from rising through the floor and down into the structure. Sounds like a good idea, but this is not to say that we are big fans of using these vapor blockers. That potentially also can trap moisture inside structures and in general also create an unhealthy indoor environment. We did a lot of study of moisture barriers versus breathable materials, and we'll discuss this in much more detail later. Seen from the outside, this is just some guy jumping on an old tractor and driving 10 minutes over to his neighbor's cornfield to pick up some logs. What's the big deal? But thinking back on it a little later, I think this was the moment when I realized something important. My father gave me this tractor. He died in 2022, and I'm just so happy he got to see the beginning of my journey with wood. When he was sick the months before he passed away, we would sometimes sit and watch videos from the Northmen together all evening. Especially the video grandfather reminded him of his own father when he was a kid. I still have a private playlist on YouTube with the videos we would watch. So driving out to this field on my own and also having his old chainsaw with me along with my own just gave me this journey through a spectrum of emotions. Mostly thankfulness of being able to do this and also having a part of my father with me in what I do, and that I'm being allowed to do this with my own daughter. So I got to the noble fir spot and started taking down a few trees closest to the field. You can see there aren't many big branches left on these big logs because they have been used to harvest greenery for Christmas for many years. These trees have already served their purpose, so I'm just happy that we can repurpose them meaningfully to build a cabin. Otherwise, they would probably just end up as waste or, in the best case, maybe be shredded into wood chips for gardening or to be used as fuel in a biomass burner. Noble fir is also known for its straight grain and low weight, so it's really optimal for timber framing or whatever it is called what I'm about to do. It's also pretty resistant to rot and pests, so I'm just glad that they can contribute to a cycle of sustainability. After putting them down, luckily out on the field, I started to remove whatever was left of branches and also cut up the logs into pieces that would fit on the sawmill. My homemade log mover can only take one log at a time, so I'm just having some mornings and some evenings where I'm driving back and forth with logs. Sometimes Julie came with me to help me prepare and load the logs. But then she shifted job and became the master of the sawmill. She started to mill the wood for the timber frame while I was going a bit back and forth with more logs. The important thing I realized was a profound sense of continuity and connection to my roots, and also a newfound meaningfulness with my work with wood. My father may not be here, but my daughter is. And someday out there in the future, she'll be building houses or cabins with the people that are important to her. And it started with this little cabin. Putting up a timber frame is a fairly easy job. It's basically just sawing the noble fir rafters to length, screwing them together in a square, and then raising those squares and screwing them together in another square. We're just making squares. Julia had a brilliant realization. Building a house is really nothing more than putting pieces of wood on top of other pieces of wood. And you start from the bottom and work your way upwards and outwards. And I'll have to give it to her. We started with a foundation, we made a structure on the foundation and made it into a platform by screwing floorboards on. Then we made a structure for the walls, and on top of those walls we put up some beams. Making a small cabin like this makes you realize that this is how most houses are built, big or small. Julia spent the last year diving into various community projects and outdoor challenges. She pushed her limits, learned new skills, and grew in ways I had never imagined. Her experiences ignited a passion for sustainable living and building, which she brought back home to this cabin. She wanted to build a cabin not just as a place for herself to stay, but also to build something together with me and learning how to use tools, but also for the spirit of community. This cabin will be a place where friends, makers, and anyone seeking a peaceful retreat can stay and connect with nature. Working on this project together, I have seen a new side of my daughter. Her determination, creativity, and willingness to learn have made me incredibly proud. It has really brought us closer together. Julia's journey has taught me and her that every end is a new beginning. This cabin is the culmination of her growth and our shared efforts. But it is also the start of many more adventures. It might be the end of part 1 of this build, but it's really just the beginning of something much bigger. I believe this cabin is part of a bigger plan, one that Julia might see more clearly than I do. And speaking of bigger plans, I have another daughter that's making a different plan. A plan that somehow also got me involved. You know, being a self-employed woodworker and YouTuber has its perks. No alarm clocks, no strict schedule, just me, my tools and my imagination. At least that is what I like to tell myself. But then I woke up one Thursday, and this was not just any Thursday, this was August the 29th, and my wife and I had somehow promised to help our daughter with some IKEA furniture on Saturday. That's in 2 days. Yeah, I know there is a lot to unpack there. If you follow my channel, you have probably seen me building an entire reclaimed cabin with my daughter Julia. But nope, that is not about her. We got another daughter who's studying in a whole different part of Denmark. She and her boyfriend just moved into a new apartment. And surprise, it's small. It's like neat custom furniture small, or IKEA small, if you like. So my daughter sketched out some ideas for the space, and sure enough, she found some IKEA options for it also. So here we were, planning to drive across the country for IKEA. And I know what you're thinking. Wait, didn't this guy build a whole cabin with one daughter, and now he's just mounting flat pack furniture with the other? But didn't he see the Swedish maker's video about paying a woodworker instead?
I'm sorry, IKEA.
I mean, if a Swedish guy dumps IKEA, shouldn't a Danish guy know better than that? Where's the woodworker in all of this? Somebody go wake him up. But then I looked closer at my daughter's notebook drawings. And that's when I saw it. Actual design drawings. She was leaving me hints like breadcrumbs. Clever girl. She knows how much I dislike IKEA. This idea of turning one big desk into 2 smaller desks is like opening a door to endless possibilities. No legs, just the tabletop cascading down to the floor like a waterfall. You could stand one of them up and boom, you would have a standing desk. Or push them together for a long desk, a wide desk, or even a corner desk. Heck, you could slap one over your bed and call it a bed desk. The options are endless, and I'm already hooked. The design really simple. Some people call this a U-desk, and sure, some folks build these things out of thick, fancy oak. But I have got 2 days to pull this off and avoid the dreaded IKEA trip. Milling pallet wood would take like a week. I don't have a lot of fancy oak laying around, and let's be real, I'd do just about anything to skip IKEA. So here I am at 9:17 on a Thursday morning, staring at these plans and realizing it is really just 3 pieces of wood. I've screwed wood together before, so how hard can that be? So I figured this was a good time to test my joinery skills. I mean, sure, I could just drive screws in from the top, but let's be honest, that wouldn't look great on a desk. And it definitely wouldn't hold up to any serious side pressure. And there are always some pocket holes to hide the screws inside. And also dominoes, which are super strong for joining wood. But the problem is there isn't much meat in a 21mm plywood sheet for the domino to grip in. Then I remembered this little trick that makes me look like a way better woodworker than I actually am. Betting all my luck on that trick, I grabbed some 21mm plywood sheets and decided to cut them into 2 equal desktops and 4 legs. And the first order of business, cut off that ugly factory edge and then mill the pieces down to 60 centimeters wide, just like the drawing said. I used my table saw for this part because, let's face it, nothing makes you feel more like a pro than slicing wood on a table saw. But time was flying, so I switched to the track saw to get the pieces cut down to length. The plan, well, the original plan, was to finish both desks on day 1, tackle the other mystery item from the drawings on day 2, and then hit the road on day 3. Simple, right? But here I am a few hours into the first day, and all I have managed to do is to cut 6 pieces of wood to size. And oh, film it, of course. So yeah, I think it is time to skip ahead and dive straight into the joinery. So here is my first tip, and don't worry, there is another one coming too, for anyone who wants to look like a much better woodworker than they actually are, like me. Cheat with fancy joinery. I got myself a dovetail jig, and if you can turn on a router, you can make professional looking joinery. This was my first time using it, so I did a little test on 2 scraps of plywood, and guess what? It actually worked. No glue, and the joint was still really strong. Now, under serious time pressure, I dived right in and routed the joinery on one side of one of the desks. And I may have gotten a bit too aggressive with the router, or maybe I went in the wrong direction because there was quite some tear out everywhere. By this point, it was already after 1 o'clock and I have been in the shop for 4 hours. I decided to take a lunch break, not because I was really hungry, but because I needed to rethink my entire existence as a woodworker. Refueled with coffee, I got back to the shop and gave it another shot. This time I took it slow, carefully removing material from the outside before routing the dovetails. And what do you know? Almost no tear out. I figured it was a smart move to glue up the first table before jumping into the joinery on the second one. The clock is ticking and I have only got about 4 of those red corner clamps, the ones that I regret buying on Temu. So I need to get that glue drying while I work on routing the dovetails for table number 2. And time is not on my side. But hey, we got clamps, we got glue, and I still have a little bit of hope left somewhere. These dovetails are a really tight fit, but with a little light hammer action, this thing is rock solid. To make sure the joint dries at a perfect 90-degree angle, I clamped up the corners with my trusty Woodpecker Reddish clamps. That's definitely not woodpeckers. Then it is straight back to the dovetails on the second table. I've got to say, just looking at the joinery makes me feel like a far better woodworker than I actually am. And remember, I promised you another tip to look like a pro. Don't worry, it is coming soon. I just need to finish this second table first. This plywood is surprisingly strong and doesn't flex much, but I added a stretcher underneath the table to beef up the structure a little bit more. After cutting it to the exact length, I drilled some pocket holes and then glued and screwed it to the underside. Meanwhile, I'm also working on table number 2, moving my clamping contraptions over as the clock ticks away. It is already 16:48, that's almost 10 to 5, on day 1, and I'm starting to realize the third table might not happen. But hey, optimism, right? I'm cutting another stretcher for table 2 and wait, who unplugged the vac from the miter saw? While mounting the second stretcher, I had a light bulb moment. Maybe I should trim some material off the middle to avoid some knee banging under the table. So I grabbed this giant flush trim bit for my router and made a test cut. So the test cut went fine, but when I started cutting away on the stretcher, it didn't exactly go as planned. Let's just say the jigsaw had to come to the rescue. And it's a good thing that I have a sander because I need to do a little work on it. And it's also a good thing that this will be hidden under the table. By the time I started sanding, it was already 8 p.m. and I had other things to take care of too. I really hope to get both tables sanded and finished today, but it looks like I'll have to push some of that today too. And speaking of day 2, I had some other things to handle in the morning. You know, running a family and YouTube channel takes time. So when I finally made it to the workshop, it was already 11:15. I should fire myself. I decided to take the finishing operation outside, and here is the second tip for looking like a way better woodworker than you actually are. It is all about the sandpaper and the finish. You can use the best wood in the world, but if you don't spend time on the finish, it will look amateurish, if that's a word. Now, my wood here isn't exactly oak or walnut, it is birch plywood. And plywood isn't exactly known for its fine furniture status, but hey, since I'm now a designer working with plywood, I have a vision for this finish. And hopefully it doesn't turn out looking like a preschool art project. So I started sanding with 40 grit, moved up to 80 grit and then 120, and I finished it off with a round of 150 grit before cleaning the wood with wood cleaner. And here's the thing, my daughter is not a fan of white or yellowish wood, so I had no choice but to find either some paint or a wood oil with a bit of color. I had some clear wood oil from Rubio Monocoat, plus some free samples with different brown tones. But instead of wasting time running a bunch of tests and ordering some cans, I just crossed my fingers, mixed some color samples in the pure oil, slapped on the sample and hoped for the best. And with a bit of luck, this finish is going to look great and repel anything. Water, coffee spills, life regrets, anything. So the second tip for looking like a pro woodworker, spend time on the finish. I grabbed a sponge, spread the oil, let it soak in for a bit, and then I wiped it off with another sponge. Or an old Jesper makes t-shirt, you know, whatever is handy. Normally, Rubio Monocoat only needs one coat, but this wood was thirsty. So I added another application of oil, and then I spent some time with a spongy thing on my sander, massaging the oil into the wood and polishing the surface smooth. And honestly, the color came out way better than I expected. Like, way better. It really brought out the best in the birch plywood. You'd never guess it's plywood unless you look at the edges. And I'm actually pretty proud of how I showcased the plywood with the joinery. Plywood pride, people. But hey, that is just what I think. What really matters is what my daughter and her boyfriend think. And what you think. So let me know in the comments right below that little subscribe button. We hit the road for our cross-country adventure. Eventually, we pull up to my daughter's cozy little apartment and reveal that we may not need to go to IKEA, but I guess we'll see about that. We set them up, and I've got to admit, the color turned out exactly how I imagined. It is rich, it is warm, and it is totally coffee-like. And the best part is they really love it. Plus, the surface treatment is already working, repelling water like a pro, even though it's been like less than 24 hours since I slapped this on. As we stand there admiring the tables, I realize that I never did get around to making that third mystery table. So I guess it is right back to the shop when I get home, or maybe a trip to IKEA anyway. Speaking of avoiding IKEA, there is no limit to what I'll do to avoid a trip there, even stealing wood. I'm a criminal. I stole wood from a public beach area. I love recycling and upcycling, all kinds of cycling, and also apparently I have no limits to what I'll do to get free wood, even steal it. On my morning walk, I came across some wood in this public beach area. It used to function as a bench, I think, but this bench is definitely not functional anymore. So I guess it's okay for me to take it, right? I could always argue that I was just cleaning up the area for trash, even though the wood hustler in me could see that most of the wood was in pretty fine condition. I should be able to make something nice from this wood and sell it for a decent profit. Perhaps I could make a bench out of it. They sell for a lot of money already, and with the summer coming up, it should be an easy sell and not a lot of work. Profit is above everything, I think. So I took the wood home and figured I could upcycle this into a functional bench again. You know, the path of least resistance. I brewed a strong cup of coffee, got a few tools to my little outdoors workshop, and got to work. Since this was pretty much already a bench, the work was just getting some rusted wood screws out, fixing up some rusted bolts with some WD-40, and give the whole thing a quick sand with some 80 grit sandpaper. and then it was lunch, so I made a quick omelette. While having lunch, I kept thinking about how I could make the biggest profit. That would probably be by giving the wood some protection with some modern colors. Something that could attract a wealthy buyer, someone with a beach property with a nice terrace overlooking the ocean. Sounds really nice. So, with that brilliant plan in mind, I remembered that Rubio Monocoat sent me some samples of their new outdoor wood protection called DuoGrid. Let's put that to good use. I think the tabletop would look great with this color, which is light blue, very beachish, and a contrasting color for the base. It's not sponsored, by the way, but I did receive the cans for free. That will help with the profit. This is almost furniture flipping, which is kind of trendy. I mean, it sounds great that you take some old or ugly furniture that you get for free or for very cheap, or in my case, stealing, and then you fix it up and sell it for a profit. And somebody gets a recycled piece of furniture instead of buying it from new. But I also noticed a flip side to furniture flipping. We have some public recycling stations where you can leave stuff that is still usable and other people in need can pick it up and bring it home for free. But professional furniture flippers are now coming with big cars and they empty those places several times a day. So there's nothing there for the single mom with no budget when she stops by, which was kind of the point with these places. But a little bad taste in the mouth has never stopped mankind. And I think this bench looks like $1 million now. There is no seat on the bench left, so I'll need to find some suitable wood from my wood pile. A few construction beams on one side, and for the other side I found a slab of poplar, and I just saw it up to the correct size. I apply DuoGrid outdoor wood finish to the surfaces and leave them to dry overnight. I'm really starting to like this DuoGrid as it promises much better mechanical UV protection than traditional wood finishes. That should keep this bench in good shape for many years to come. The next morning, the now cured wood finish has cured, I think, and the bench looks like $1 million. But I didn't sleep well, and I don't exactly feel like $1 million. And I know that feeling, and there's only one cure for that kind of thing. So I returned the bench to the public beach where it belonged. I made a few new friends, and one of them is a retired carpenter who now also got the idea for a few things that he could fix in a public place. It started to rain a few days after, so I checked in on the bench. Even the rough sawn poplar seed got water repellent with just one coating with this DuoGrid thing. And speaking of rain and challenging weather in general,
so in this video, Jesper and his daughter build a cabin in their backyard.
we are not as far with the cabin build as we thought we would be at this point, and winter is approaching really fast. There is no way that the raw frame and the flooring can survive the rainy and snowy part of the year, and the tarps that we try to cover it with just seem to rip apart in the strong winds. So the main focus and priority is to get the cabin frame covered with a roof and some walls. Our plan for the roof is to use these 5 metal roofing sheets that I found on my dad's property when I unfortunately was cleaning it out for him. They should just be able to cover the area of the roof. The plan for the siding is to simply cut off more of these noble fir logs into cladding boards. That is just a rough log sawn into boards that is 2 to 3 centimeter in thickness, with the edges intact on both sides. In Denmark we call them Kalmar boards. And then we mount the boards horizontally on all sides, overlapping each other. But these are just rough plans, and rough plans rarely turn out as planned. I had a full month just laying on the floor in my office because my sciatic nerve got stuck somewhere inside my pelvis. I couldn't walk or stand, but I started doing yoga and slowly unwinded that sciatic nerve again. But while lying on the floor, I thought about the metal roofing. It gets really hot with the sun shining down on it and really cold during the winter. And winter is coming. When it rains, the raindrops make a huge noise hitting the metal roofing. Julia talked about getting a living green roof on the cabin, but that's very heavy and also very expensive to install with all the waterproofing and root barriers needed. And guess what? You can't have it close to other buildings due to the fire hazard in the dry season. So, while laying there on the floor without being able to cut up the noble firs or much else, I remembered that I had gotten some big plywood sheets from my dad's place, and one of them I had already used to make a form for my pallet blocks river table. Yeah, I made one of those. So, if I just had enough of those to put on as roofing under whatever I could put on top, and perhaps even put it on as siding too, that would make it super sturdy. But I also knew I wouldn't have nearly enough, so I started researching plywood laying there on the floor. ChatGPT suggested that the most environmentally sustainable plywood on the whole planet was being produced in my backyard, in the forests of Finland. I'll get into the details of how I ended up having a meeting with this plywood company in a bit. But when I finally got back up on my feet again, there were 2 pallets of plywood magically appearing in my driveway, along with a note saying, "We love your cabin project with your daughter and we would like to support it." Wow, that's amazing. Like, who would do that? Now, this generous donation meant that we could seriously up our cabin building game. I'm not talking about Julia's ambitions here. She might have had skyscraper dreams compared to my modest shack aspirations. Protecting the flooring from water is our biggest priority, so putting up the roof first is the first priority. So here's a little montage of us putting up these half sheets of mold-protected spruce plywood sheets. My initial goal was pretty simple. Get a floor going, some framing, put a roof on, and slap on some outside wall cladding. The inside stuff like insulation and walls, that was future Jesper's problem. Essentially, it was going to be a summer cabin, great at keeping out rain and bigger animals, but also a 5-star hotel for wind and smaller critters. But thanks to this plywood fairy godmother, our little cabin dreams just got a big upgrade. And by upgrade I mean that we might actually survive the winter without turning into popsicles. As we were making progress, Julia received some exciting news for her. An opportunity to study in Italy again that she couldn't or wouldn't pass up. But with the weather turning worse, I had to step up and secure the roof on my own. And that is perfectly fine. I love working on my own, I think. Up on the roof? Really? Did you leave me up on the roof? Alone? Hello?
To see father-daughter work together to build something that the daughter primarily makes. You know, Jesper's kind of just a grunt labor.
She's the brains in this, for sure.
Yeah.
With Julia off to Italy and dark clouds rolling in, I had to shift gears. The bad weather was coming fast, and I needed to make sure our hard work didn't get washed away. And by hard work, I mean that flooring. The fastest way to make the roof waterproof in a rush was to put up some underroofing on top of the plywood sheets. I found a couple of rolls of underroofing from when I cleaned out my dad's place. Thank you, Dad. At the time, I had no idea what was in those rolls, but after reading a bit up on it, thanks ChatGPT, I found out that underroofing is a waterproof barrier that is often used under the roof itself as an extra layer of protection, and it can act as the top of the roof for a few months with no problem. So I decided to put these rolls on to protect the cabin from whatever was coming my way. But I also found out that it is pretty hard to put up in the current hard winds that we were having here. I looked at how Bo Miles fixed the roof on his cabin, and to me it looks like he's putting up some sort of tarp as the underroof, and then some metal sheets directly on top. Metal roofing sheets are great for durability and for weather resistance, but they have some drawbacks if used without an underroof. First, metal is a great conductor of heat and also cold, which means without an insulation layer, the cabin would be like an oven in the summer and a freezer in the winter, making it very uncomfortable. Additionally, metal roofs can be quite noisy. Every raindrop, hailstone or gust of wind can create a lot of noise inside the cabin. An underroof layer helps dampen those sounds, making the cabin much quieter and more pleasant to live in. And if that wasn't enough, condensation can be a big issue with metal roofs. When the hot air inside the cabin hits the cold metal roof, it causes moisture to form, leading to potential water damage and mold. The underroofing acts as a barrier to prevent condensation from causing issues inside the cabin. With the underroofing in place, thank God, we entered into December and January, the darkest and coldest months of the year. Julia got back from Italy, thank God, but the days that we could work on the cabin were quite frankly limited. The sun at this time of year barely kisses the horizon, casting long shadows over our project, and time seems to move as slowly as the ice forming on the nearby lake. We had snow and frost and storms, and then more snow and more frost and even more storms. The days quite frankly blurred together, marked by the shifting of light and dark, the relentless grip of winter tightening around us. In those brief moments where the weather relented, I seized the opportunity to do a little work. I ventured outside where the tools lay buried under snow and a bucket of water had turned into solid ice. I started putting up a wind barrier, something that I found in my own barn, not my dad's barn, that were leftovers from another project. The wind howled and the storm clouds kept rolling in, so it seemed, and I just kept saying to myself that even the darkest night will end and the sun will rise. It was a reminder that despite the harsh conditions, progress could be made, a little progress sometimes, and the promise of some warm light was just behind the horizon. I hope so. The dark days continued. We didn't get the grapes harvested this year because of my sciatica nerve issue and many other factors. My wife remembers to light a candle to remember those who are dead and those who were close to us. It's a good reminder in the dark days that we won't be here forever, and what we do now matters. So I was just happy that I was on my feet again, and that we were able to go outside a few hours every day and work a little bit until our fingers started to freeze too much. It is almost impossible to hold tools and screws with thick gloves on. But despite the challenges, we managed to make some progress on the cabin. And one crucial step was creating a 2 cm spacing between the wind barrier and the outer layer of plywood, using strips I cut from the same plywood boards. This spacing might seem like a small detail, but I promise you that is quite essential. The gap allows for proper ventilation, preventing moisture buildup and associated risks of mold and rot. I have said this so many times. Why do I keep writing about mold and rot in this script? You know this already. I don't have to repeat myself. Come on, man. Who wrote this script? Oh, I did. Okay, let's move on. I'm just so grateful for the plywood donation. That's really making the cabin a full-year cabin. Wood itself is a fantastic material, but I guess you know that I believe that by now. So we are not only putting a sheet of plywood on the outside, we are also sawing up the remaining of the noble firs and mounting them on the plywood on the outside. We're also looking to put some kind of insulation material inside the timber framing, and lastly also a layer of wood on the inside. That's a lot of wood. We don't have enough insulation material, but something will happen soon, I promise. Like a small disaster in another house, from which this cabin will benefit. Oh shit, that's my house. Do you know the kind of project where you start out thinking this will be done in a few months? We'll spend almost no money and we'll just do it like Bo Miles. We'll be running back and forth a few times with a wheelbarrow, and we also have no baby to tend to unlike Bo. So this will be done before we know about it. Well, it turns out that Bo Miles is a smart guy. He set a tight deadline and then he stopped building. We didn't get that memo because we're still building. We had breaks and breakdowns and probably got a little too carried away into the project. It's no longer just a shelter. It's become a bit of an obsession. At one point, I found myself fixating on the metal sheets I planned on using for the roof. Imagine the noise during rainstorms and the potential for condensation during the very hot and cold periods. In my head, the cabin was already rotted away due to condensation. I promise I won't mention condensation anymore. Unless... So naturally, I started researching alternative roofing options. Fiber cement seemed promising, but then I remembered the idea that Julia had about the green roof. How cool would that be, right? Until I discovered that a green roof is crazy expensive. It is like trying to grow a garden on top of a closet. It requires a ton of underroofing and different barriers. And get this, it is also a fire hazard during the dry periods. It couldn't be close to the other buildings due to the approval of the insurance company and the fire department. And that was the final nail in the green roof coffin. After abandoning the eco-friendly dream, I called around to my local suppliers and surprise, I got a really good deal on some fiber cement roofing. So fiber cement it is. Durable, low maintenance, low price, and it won't turn our cabin into an impromptu drum kit during storms. Plus, it is less likely to spontaneously combust, which is always a bonus. Thank you, fiber cement. It was still January and still cold as but then miraculously the rain and the wind decided to take a vacation somewhere else. Because for a few glorious days the sun peeked through the clouds and smiled down on our little project, and we finally got some work done. Julia took charge of the plywood work, while I tackled the task of putting up the fiber cement roofing. In a sweet twist of fate, we even mounted a door that originally came from Julia's grandmother's house. This door has seen generations pass through it. My wife, Julia's mother, spent her childhood opening and closing this door countless times. Seeing it now in this cabin was like seeing her childhood passing by. Quite a nostalgic experience. The markings and stickers on this door continue to whisper tales of past winters, summers, journeys, childhood adventures, and family memories. And now we are adding a new chapter to the story of this door. I also had an old window from my workshop that we had planned to go onto the wall facing the lake. So, one day when Julia wasn't home, I decided that it was window time. We continued to put plywood up. One advantage of working two people with only one set of tools is that we constantly steal either the drill or the circular saw from each other. So I figured I'd better get started doing something else. So I started putting up the second layer of wood right away. But we would also really soon discover an issue that would set us back quite a bit, at least in our pride. Oh no, what can that be? But for now we don't know anything about that, so I'm cutting the cladding boards to length, and Julia went insulation foam maniac and filling up all the small gaps with foam.
Mine is from one of my favorite channels from Denmark, Jesper Makes. It's spelled Jesper, but that's not how you say it in Danish. It's Jesper. Jesper Makes. Building a cabin with my daughter, it's a good video, I promise. That is actually in the title.
Yeah.
Building a cabin with my daughter, it's a good video, I promise. That's how you know it's good.
Mm-hmm.
when
There's the key
title
to success.
Actually says it's exactly. It's a good video, I promise. Jesper and his daughter build a cabin in their backyard, which is like a giant field. He looks like he has like a whole farm or a really big piece of land. And they decide to build this as inexpensively as possible. So they use like pallet wood, they use like reclaimed flooring, they even used like some fallen logs, some fallen black alder from the woods behind their house. At one point, they go like help somebody down the road, like harvest part of a Christmas tree farm, and I think they pull some dead fur out of that.
Yeah.
And he has a little sawmill, and this is great because, you know, a lot of times when you have a father, daughter, or a woodworker and a kid, you know, they might let the kid, you know, like glue something or paintbrush something. He's hauling logs while she's running this giant sawmill. This kid, right? Yeah, she's pushing this blade, you know, while he's out there hauling logs because he can only haul them one at a time, right? So he's hauling them through the woods and she's running the sawmill, and that's great. I mean, he let her do everything. She's driving screws, she's hammering stuff,
and she designed the thing. Like she's the architect as well.
She designed it, and then he built the prototype. Yeah, that absolutely. And it's not really a step-by-step video. So he talks about like some of the techniques they use, but he weaves a story all the way through it, and he is a master at this.
Yes.
We worked day and night, and I got off to a pretty good start with the wall paneling.
The master at this.
But then came a massive shower from above, like a sign that showed us a giant construction error that we made last summer.
Yes.
And some people have already figured it out in the comments. Something that we had no other choice than to fix. And because I'm a YouTuber, at least that is what other people are saying, I embraced this moment and thought I had to do this interview style with myself and talk to the camera kind of thing, where I break down, and apparently very apparently, I'm not a very good YouTuber, because this was my talk to camera confession breakdown, and I don't think you will learn anything from my lousy acting here, except perhaps trying to avoid that kind of YouTubers in the future. So let me just try to explain what happened. We built a floor as one big platform. But then we put up some walls, dividing this platform into an inside and an outside part. And I guess you can see where this is going, because with the flooring directly connected underneath, that's a really bad idea. We essentially made a landing platform for rain, where the only escape is to run alongside the board's tongue and groove and into the cabin itself. Oh God, see the wet spots inside here. This is a highway for rain. And this YouTuber didn't figure it out. But then I remembered the old saying from ancient times, or maybe it was Adventure Time, that sucking at something is the first step to being sorta good at something. So I did a bit of reverse engineering, took down the freshly mounted cladding boards, unscrewed the flooring boards, had a board meeting about the boards before onboarding a sip of coffee, for then grabbing the circular saw and literally cutting off the water transportation highway boards. A circular saw has this very annoying foot blade that prevents it from cutting completely up against the wall here. So to solve this, I have found my father's good old precision woodworking tool to finish the job. Thanks, Dad. I mounted the cladding boards again, but now with the lowest board covering the end grain from the flooring. That's smart. And I used the wheat burner to dry the base, for then just to splash some Duragrit on, cut the tongue and groove off on the table saw, for then just to screw them, the flooring boards right back on again. Now with a pencil width of spacing between them on all sides. We all need our personal space, I guess. Or just space for water to drain. You dumb YouTuber. So while I was fumbling around on the outside, Julia actually made some pretty good progress on the inside, insulating the cabin. And as you can see from my confession video, we had stacked some insulation bats up here. Where did they come from, you may ask? Oh, the joy of multitasking home improvement disasters. Thank you for asking. You see, while building the cabin, and by I mean my wife of course, also had the brilliant idea to paint the ceiling in our main house. But surprise, surprise, the boards were hanging low in some spots. So naturally I turned on the camera and I took some of them down, only to discover that beneath 2 layers of lowered ceiling was the original 100-year-old reed plaster, cracked and sagging like my self-esteem after way too many DIY projects gone wrong. Deciding that I clearly hadn't enough on my plate already, and to add some spice to my otherwise bland life, I tore down the lower ceilings, including the insulation bats they used in past times. And in a stroke of pure genius or just laziness, I carried them directly down into the cabin. So there you have it, locally sourced, reclaimed building materials. Or just carrying one disaster into another. You are probably wondering what the heck happened inside the main house. Well, let's just say that some structural timber from the 1800s decided that their shit was over. Our first floor was about to become very close friends with the main floor. Just a minor case of historic architecture giving up on life. And I'll probably make a separate video on that little adventure. So stay tuned for more DIY. While I was messing around with the ceiling in the main house, Julia did some real work on the cabin. Using different kinds of reclaimed insulation bats, she insulated the walls and the roof. And I didn't catch much of it on camera, unfortunately. She works shorter periods, but she is very stable and works every day. And I was sort of busy trying to prevent our main house from collapsing. With a roof that has proved waterproof so far, get it? A door and a window, and now also insulation, this little structure has definitely moved from being a shelter to being an all-year cabin. Like, you could stay here during the winter if you wanted. So, while I was knee-deep in the ceiling crisis in the main house, Julia was over at the cabin cutting plywood for the interior. She got her hands on my Festool track saw, and let me tell you, she has become a master with that thing. Julia tackled all the different walls and roof pieces, even the funny angles, like a pro. That tool is brilliant. Now, I must admit, the footage I have is mostly with me in it too, helping Julia out. That is just because Julia doesn't start up the camera when she goes to work. But sometimes I drop by with a camera and get roped into lending a hand. I promise she did all the interior paneling. And if you're tackling a project like this, get yourself a track saw. We managed to get through the winter without any permanent damage to the cabin. The inside is pretty much done thanks to Julia's work with the spruce plywood, the track saw, and a layer of Rubio monocoat. In that regard, we owe a big thanks both to Rubio monocoat, but especially also to Visa Plywood in Finland for providing both the interior ply here and also the exterior plywood we used for the roof and the outside walls. And I'm so grateful for my newfound friends in Finland. I continued cutting up logs to mount as the outer layer of the cabin, the layer that will take all the beating from the elements. This cabin is part of a bigger plan, a plan that involves not working 9 to 5 in an office like ever, a more spiritual plan connected to nature. I will get into that in a future video. You may have been wondering who was the two guys talking about our first cabin video. That was Jared and Lee running the podcast, The New Cranky Workshop. And here's a few takeaways from their talk about our little cabin.
You know, he really gets his daughter involved. It's really about building a relationship with his daughter and creating memories. I mean, my father's gone now, but the stuff that I remember was him taking me fishing, him letting me work on the house with him. I mean, that's the stuff I remember about my dad. The stuff that we did together, you know? Yeah. So she will remember that long after he's gone. And hopefully it'll be something that she continues for the rest of her life and passes on to her kids. Because we need that.
It is precisely 3 years since I published this video that kickstarted my woodworking YouTube career. It is also 1 year since I published this video that changed everything again 100 times. And it is 0 years since I returned from the most transformative woodworking journey that I have ever been on. I'm trying to say that I just got back from it. This chapter is about woodworking, YouTube and the exploits and hacks that of course exist. Note that I called this video a chapter and not a video. This little distinction will be very important later. Plans within plans. But let's start with the beginning. This little pallet coffee table, which is located in a small barber shop in a small town in Denmark. Wait, that looks like pallet blocks. Who on earth got this stupid idea to start gluing pallet blocks together? Yeah, it was this guy who started calling himself Jesper Makes in 2020. After a year of dismantling pallets, he had a lot of pallet blocks in his workshop. And while most people burn these, Jesper, I mean of course, I decided to turn them into a tabletop. At the same time, I have gotten a bit of experience editing some really bad videos. So I took that experience and tried to make the video more entertaining. And honestly also putting more of my quirky personality into it. And like most people burn the pallet blocks and also delete their old bad videos from YouTube, I found a way to reuse them. We'll get back to this little exploit, but let's focus on the coffee table video for a moment now. I started the video with this little sequence of me lifting the project from my workbench with a sound effect of something breaking and my pretty face saying the F word. That was my idea of a hook at that point, but also notice the music. I usually use music in my videos. In this one, I played a few notes from the main theme in the beginning and also throughout the video. And that way, when I start up the track near the end, it seems more familiar. And then I just started putting pallet blocks together like no one had done before. The mix of trying something new, my quirky accent that I can't hear myself, and some funky editing, like switching from high-speed cuts to a sudden ASMR moment, seemed to catch people's attention. Maybe some were just curious to see when this project would fail, but they stuck around until the end at least. This video didn't blow up right away. It took about 6 months before YouTube picked up on it. And that is how it works on YouTube. Small channels get the same shot as the bigger ones, but it takes some time to gather enough data for the algorithm to push your content. And you know, YouTube's algorithm is perfectly balanced. There are no exploits. But just like the table slowly came together, so did my understanding of how YouTube works, including some exploits. But we'll get into that soon enough. Exactly 3 years later than this, I traveled over to the Northmen in Latvia, a guild of master craftsmen building houses, boats and tools the old way. And boy, did I learn how to handle axes and chisels. What actually started my dream of being a woodworker and YouTuber was watching the video The Birth of a Dugout Canoe. And now I'm actually meeting the guy who made the movie and the guy who made the dugout canoe. and that was because I made some YouTube videos talking about this, and the Northmen saw those videos and invited me over. That is some loop that got closed there. And so while working in their barn, I noticed their code. Do what you love was what got me into woodworking in the first place. Begin where you are and start with what you got. I had pallets, and after dismantling many of them, I had pallet blocks laying everywhere. This pallet blocks coffee table video became part of a longer video a few years later. A big piece in a larger puzzle of things that fitted together. And making not just wood fit together, but also make your videos fit together and form a bigger story. That's an important lesson. A lesson that I didn't know that I was learning while gluing blocks together and making my first YouTube video success. Wood within wood and stories within stories. And we'll get into more detail about these strategies, but for now we are building a coffee table from pallet blocks, and we have all the blocks glued together with regular wood glue to form one massive block of wood, but still with some tiny gaps here and there. I started filling up those gaps with epoxy resin, and the joke that I made a lot when I visited the Northmen was whenever I made a mistake and chopped off too much material with the axe or a chisel, we could just fill it up with epoxy. Let's talk about the YouTube exploit. A few years ago, I watched this video called Grandfather on the Northmen's channel. It was initially released in 4 parts: summer, autumn, winter and spring. But then they put it all together into a full documentary, almost an hour long. And here's the interesting part: the full documentary got way more views than the individual chapters combined. It was also the version that I would keep watching with my father when he was sick, so the numbers really stuck with me. My brain just noticed patterns like that, and I got this crazy idea. What if I made my own full documentary? I already had a 14-minute video telling the story of how I started this whole journey, so I used that as the intro. And then I followed it up with my best wood recycling projects and titled the whole thing, "This will change how you see wood, I promise." Total runtime was 2 hours and 48 minutes. I was honestly terrified when I released it. The first few days, the statistics looked awful. I thought it was going to be a major flop, but I was wrong. People saw it as one long cohesive journey, probably thanks to the intro that set up the rest of the videos in like chapters in a longer story. And now, some people say that I started the trend of longer woodworking videos on YouTube. Sorry about that. I'll share the actual results in a moment, as well as how I later took all my early pretty terrible videos and turned them into a super long compilation that is also now getting tons of views. But one of the people who noticed the video "This will change how you see wood" was Cam from Blacktail Studio. We chat occasionally about this stuff, so I just asked him what he thought about the exploit.
I saw Jesper was doing really well with them. And I know that YouTube had passed Netflix as the most streamed app for TVs now.
But before we dive into that, you're probably wondering how the weird little pallet block coffee table and the timber frame in Latvia are coming along. And I promise, it is all coming together. The next step is flattening the pallet blocks table to get a nice uniform surface. I rigged up a homemade flattening jig, and so far it is working great. And meanwhile, over in Latvia, we have been putting together pieces for a massive timber frame. And while I was there, one of the craftsmen, Søren, asked if I wanted to check out a forge they were building, a traditional blacksmith forge. Honestly, I had no idea what to expect, but what I saw could have been straight out of Lord of the Rings. It was incredible. I can't even begin to express how grateful I am to have experienced this, learning the old ways from true craftsmen and getting the chance to be a part of their story. And how am I lucky enough not to have a real job and get to do all this? I'm probably not the best one to explain it, but I know someone who is.
If there's one thing that's better than making furniture, it's getting paid to make furniture. And if there's one thing that's better than that, it's getting paid twice to make it once. And that's kind of the inspiration behind why I started doing these big compilation videos. I saw Jesper was doing really well with them, and I know that YouTube had passed Netflix as the most streamed app for TVs now. So I figured people on their TVs just want to put something on. I have to find something again in 9 minutes or whatever. So I made some really long compilation videos, and they aren't my most viewed videos, but some of them have done really well, and they are my most profitable videos. And it's all by repurposing content I've already released elsewhere. And what I'm shocked is how many people haven't seen the original videos. I would have thought it might have been just other fans of mine that are watching these long videos, but it's new people finding this content that just don't want to watch a 15, 20, 25-minute video. They just want to put something on and just zone out for 2 or 3 hours, maybe fall asleep. I know people say they work from home and they just put these long compilation videos on in the background. So it works great for me, and I get to get paid twice for building it once.
My first long video has over 6 million views and keeps getting steady views every day. That, along with my other long videos, have made being a self-employed YouTuber way more stable. It's like having a steady income stream from content that I have already created a long time ago. And as my best buddy from Australia says,
Good evening. G'day. So the supercut, or the massive long videos, in essence, what it is, it's a bit of a second chance to get our videos seen by a heap of other people. We put so much time and effort into making these things, and sometimes they only reach a small audience. What I've found with the couple of supercuts that I've done is they have reached a massive audience, and they've actually brought in a heap of new subscribers. And what it is good is people get a very good understanding of what this channel is all about, and that is helping them choose to instantly subscribe. So that's cool. The other massive bonus is they are really long videos. So really long videos are getting lots of ads placed on them, and that has this nice trickling effect of ad revenue to help support the channel. So they're probably the biggest ones. But the other good thing is when you're putting them together, reminiscing on how your channel has grown and changed over the years is also been quite fun looking back. Myself, I'm actually working on another one right now, so stay tuned for that.
and that's why I like to think of my regular videos as chapters in a bigger story, a journey story. Each one is a piece of a larger puzzle that comes together later in longer videos and giving viewers a much deeper understanding of what I'm trying to share. Kind of like the Grandfather Full documentary, where you follow this old man through all 4 seasons of the year instead of just one. It's the same idea behind my video This Will Change How You See Wood, where I pulled together about 12 of my best wood recycling projects and my YouTube journey to 100,000 subscribers into one long meaningful experience. It's the same with Dynamate's 5 years of pallet wood projects or Blacktail's anthology videos. Each one tells a story, but when you put them together, it creates a whole new meaning. And hey, if you have made some truly cringe-worthy videos, don't worry about it. You can still re-edit them and give them a whole new life. I did exactly that with my second long video, From Beginner to Full-Time Woodworker in 2 years. It is basically a mashup of my earliest not-so-great YouTube attempts, mixed with glimpses of a future project and jumping back and forth between the past and the present. It was a massive project, and one of the hardest parts was creating 90 minutes of brand new voiceover, but the payoff was worth it. People really connect with the way the video spans a longer time frame and shows the bigger picture. Here's a project that spans over a few years. The Hobbiton Forge in Latvia, where this whole journey recently took me. I had the chance to work with some incredible craftsmen at the Northland, and one of the projects that really stood out to me was the construction of a traditional blacksmith's forge. This isn't just any forge. It's a timber-framed masterpiece. A space that will soon be the heart of their blacksmithing craft. For the past 2 years, they've been building it with their own hands, piece by piece, beam by beam. It's a place that will not only showcase their artistry, but also pass down centuries-old skills to the next generation of craftsmen. But here's the thing, the forge still isn't finished. It's standing, but it's missing the vital equipment needed to bring it to life. Tools, forges, anvils, all the things that will make it a true center for creativity and education. That's why I'm asking for your help. If this project speaks to you as it does to me, consider making a small donation to the Northmen's fundraiser. Every little bit helps them get closer to their goal of making this forge a world-class blacksmithing hub. This forge represents more than just a building. It's a living, breathing monument to the values that guide the Northmen and so many of us. Quality over quantity, crafts over mass production, and a love for creating things that last. The link is in the description if you would like to contribute. I know times are tough everywhere, but even a small donation will help these master craftsmen finish what they started. Let's help them keep these ancient traditions alive and thriving, so we can all continue to learn from them for generations to come. Back in my little workshop, I'm finishing up the coffee table. Unknowingly, it would kickstart a whole new direction in my life later. My trust in craft and mankind is reflected in this table, where every pallet block, every imperfection was just a part of the bigger picture. And that is how I see my journey on YouTube too. Each video, each project is like a chapter in a much larger story. It wasn't just about building tables, it was about building a life around things that matter. Like the coffee table, I didn't know that a few short videos would lead me to this point, where I'm creating longer, more meaningful, hopefully content that people actually want to sit with. Those compilation videos, the so-called YouTube exploits, they aren't just a hack or a trend. They are a way to tell stories in full, letting each piece of content fit into something bigger, like wood within wood, like joinery on a cabin. My video From Beginner to Full-Time Woodworker in 2 years, it's entertaining, I promise, that was the title, was never just about woodworking. It was about showing how everything connects, how craft, patience and storytelling fit together. And that's what I've learned through this whole journey, plans within plans. Whether it's a coffee table or a long YouTube video, it all comes together in ways that you don't expect at first. But looking back now, I see how each project, whether it's my first bad video or a beautiful timber frame in Latvia, fits perfectly together into a bigger picture. Just like the Northman Forge, where tradition and modern craft meet, my own work has layered stories within stories. It's not just about the finished piece, but about the journey and the small decisions, the mistakes filled with epoxy that makes it whole somehow. So, as I finish this table and reflect on the path I have taken, I realize that it's not just the wood that comes together, it is the story of my life, my work, and the people that I've met along the way. From my small Danish workshop to the big timber frame in Latvia, it is all connected.